When growth stalls, most leaders reach for surface fixes like new campaigns, a sharper sales deck, even new hires. But the real issues are often deeper, such as misaligned systems, broken handoffs, or unreliable data. That's why we built the Growth Readiness Score. In just 5 minutes, you'll get a clear score across 4 critical areas of your revenue operations and see how you stack up against your peers with benchmark data. Tap the link in the show notes to get started. It's quick, insightful, and often reveals issues leaders don't expect.
I think everything in business boils down to psychology and what you are consciously and unconsciously assuming based upon what you're hearing. But I think that's what's happening. And so what we see is where the normal progression of a business would be, you've got to get processes in place. You've got to get your departments aligned. You've got to figure out what the next best hire is, or what can you do fractionally to make your business work.
You're listening to RevOps Champions, a podcast created for B2B leaders to help you align your people, streamline your processes, trust your data, and leverage technology in order to grow your business. Hello and welcome back. Today I'm joined by April Porter, entrepreneur, attorney, franchise strategist, and founder of Secret Sauce and FranchiseVault.ai, where she helps franchisees, franchisors, and business owners build more scalable businesses through stronger leadership, business intelligence, and intentional AI implementation. April's journey to franchising has been anything but traditional. After serving as a prosecuting attorney and municipal judge, she became a multi-unit franchise owner, experiencing firsthand both the opportunities and the realities of growing a franchise business. That experience shaped her perspective that one of the biggest challenges in franchising isn't operational execution, it's preparing franchisees to think and lead like business owners. Through her work, April has found that businesses rarely struggle because they lack technology. More often, growth exposes weaknesses in leadership, decision-making, and operational systems that were already there. Her work focuses on helping franchise organizations close the gap by developing stronger leaders, building better business intelligence, and implementing AI in ways that strengthen healthy businesses rather than compensate for broken ones. April, welcome to the RevOps Champions podcast.
Thank you so much, Brendan. I'm excited to be here.
Awesome. Yeah, it's really good to have you. April, your career has taken you from practicing law to owning and operating franchise businesses, and now to advising franchise organizations across the U.S. Looking back, what experiences led you to focus on what you call the franchise intelligence gap?
Well, when I got into franchising, much like many first-time franchise owners, I really believed that the franchisor was going to provide everything you need to be successful, because that's kind of the tagline of franchising. And although I was an attorney and a judge, I was painfully aware that I knew nothing about business. At least that's how I felt at the time. Also, as someone who is constantly learning, I was really excited to dive in and to learn, how to be a business owner. And so when I started, we had a 1-week training camp that we went to in person. And when I got there, we were practicing some sales scripts. And then basically that was the time before lunch. We would practice sales scripts and learn how to use the CRM, to manage our customer base and to check people out. And then at lunch, afterwards, we were kickboxing in the gym. And then we were going into gyms and teaching other people how to kickbox. And we did that for a week. And then we went back to our gyms and we were running them. And I'm like, I don't know anything about financials in business. I don't know anything about inventory management or resource management. And there was just a lot of things that I felt still like I didn't have all the answers. But I figured they would come. Like we were still, okay, this is just to get us off the ground and follow what they say. And that takes you to profitability. So I dug in. I was the only employee we had for the first 3 months. So I was working out in the gym with our clients from 8 in the morning till 8 in the evening, 6 days a week. We closed at noon on Saturdays. Exhausted, but loving it, loving being, a business owner. And we hit cash flow positive. And that was where we could then hire employees. And that drew my attention to something else. How do I interview an employee? What are the questions I should ask? I know there's a lot, being an attorney, I knew there was a lot of employment laws about what you could and couldn't do, but I hadn't been educated on any of that. What HR policies did we need to have in place? How do you onboard employees? How do you get them to stay? How do you compensate them and train them and make them happy? And I had bought 3 licenses. So it was at this moment where I'm like, oh my gosh, and how do I be in 3 places at once? I mean, the success we had from location 1, I was the only person here the whole time. So I've got to do all of this. And I was looking at my franchisor and there was nothing more in the training manuals or in training of any kind. And so I just knew that I was going to have to fill the gap on my own. And so luckily, as an attorney, I do know how to research things and do a lot of self-study. And so I got through the first part of that hump on my own until I reached a bottleneck about 18 months in. And that's when I had to get an executive coach to help me really take the business to the next level. And with that, we grew 4 locations in less than 3 years. And we became in the top 15% for all 4 locations month over month over month, which was a big accomplishment. But when that happened, then franchisees from all over the country started calling me and saying, what did you do? What are you doing differently? We're running the same model. Your life looks totally different than mine. And so that's when I realized it wasn't really me. Like, it wasn't just a failing that of intelligence that I had coming into franchising. This was common throughout the whole brand. And then that led me to networking with other brands. And I found out it was really common across all of franchising. And so that's a little bit longer story than you probably wanted, Brendan, but that is like the full journey of really like going from feeling like, and I think so many franchisees do feel this way, you feel like it's you, like you're just not good enough. You just don't have enough intelligence. You didn't come in prepared enough and you've got to figure it out all on your own, especially when you see the dashboards that are saying where the different units are. And I think that just makes people feel like they have to just hustle more and more and more to try to get there. And that's not really the answer.
Right. Yeah. It's almost like, how do you change it from feeling like a hamster wheel to being more of a flywheel, right?
100%. That's great.
Yeah. Yeah. Anyhow. Okay. So yeah, that's really insightful, April. So you've said that franchisors do an excellent job teaching people how to operate a business, but not necessarily how to become CEOs of that business. Where does the gap come from, and why do you think it has persisted for so long?
Well, 81% of franchisees own single units. And that statistic, I think, is one of the most important statistics in franchising, because the reality is people are not leaving jobs where they're earning, high 5-6 figure salaries to come into a business and earn a high 5-figure salary. Because owning a business, as you know, Brendan, carries a lot more risk and responsibility and time and effort than showing up to a 9 to 5. And so that's not really the vision anyone has when they make that transition. But owning a single unit in franchising will rarely take you to a 6-figure income in most brands. And so if we have 81% of our franchisees stuck in a single unit, then we have a problem, because we're not really delivering on the American dream of providing more wealth and more time freedom, as people believe that franchising will. And so I think that's a big indicator there of the gap. And I believe that the gap actually begins because we're not really addressing the psychological and emotional standards that somebody comes to franchising with. And standards isn't really the right word. The right word is programming. The psychological and the emotional programming that people come to business ownership with. Because people are, and all of us that have gone to a normal institutionalized school, we're programmed to believe that when you work harder, that's how you get the A, right? And there's a lot of routine programming that comes in. I mean, when the bell rings, you go to lunch. When the bell rings, you come back. And the reason that school was designed that way was to produce excellent factory workers. So all of this programming is meant to keep people at an employee level. And we have all of these habits that are ingrained in us to show up as an employee. And when you move to become a business owner, you don't just magically break all those habits. And even if you could, you don't know what new habits to instill in yourself that a business owner lives by. And so that's not happening. All we're doing is coming and teaching people how to operate a system. And so they're taking that, they're operating it, they're doing it based on that programming, and then they get stuck at a single unit because they realize, like, if I leave this single unit to open a second unit, everything's going to crash, everything's going to fall apart. And so ultimately, I think that's the biggest evidence that there is a gap. And then that's what we're seeing. And that's what our clients tell us. Like, our clients will make huge strides in their revenue, like amazing things. Like one of our clients, a big win, they went from $7,000 to $50,000 a month. But when you ask them what's the biggest win you've had, they always say mindset, always. And it's like, are you kidding? You're making $43,000 more per month, but yet they recognize that that shift in that psychological and emotional programming is what allows them to do that. And so for them, that's the biggest win.
Yeah, no, I can see that. So you said 80% of franchise owners own one unit. So that's essentially like the Pareto principle. So the other 20%, which are the ones that those 80% are aspiring to be, they are the ones that really have success in franchising, whereas the 80% are kind of stuck with that one unit and essentially stuck in a job, even though that's what they were trying to replace.
Well, you would think so, but it's actually a little bit different because many people open more than one location. They get to 2 or 3, but they haven't established the right skills to really manage that. And so they end up failing and closing or having to sell to get out. They sell at a loss. So there's this kind of window probably between the 80 and 90% of multi-unit owners, maybe not that high. It's probably up to like the 85%. So there's probably like 3 or 4% in there that really struggle as multi-unit owners. But also there's the like probably 70, that top 10% of the single unit owners who are thriving and they really enjoy owning a single unit. So it's not guaranteed just by owning multiple units that you're feeling like a success or that you're actually reaping the rewards of what you would define success as.
Yeah. Yeah, that's really interesting. I mean, I know there's obviously like some anomalies like Chick-fil-A, for example. I mean, their whole thing was because they want their franchisees to be successful, and they believe that can only happen if they own just one unit. I mean, there have been some exceptions since then, but I think 90 plus % of Chick-fil-A franchises are single unit, but those single units are generating huge amounts of revenue and profitability, but the owner has to be there. Right. It's not
I mean, Chick-fil-A is a really unique brand because something that Chick-fil-A does differently that I wish all brands did, quite frankly, is they require the franchisee to work in the store for a year before they can be approved to receive the unit. That would be a huge benefit to all franchisees and all franchisors because such an education is happening before the risk on either side is being taken, before, the franchisee is investing, but also before the franchisor is approving that person, because approving the wrong franchisee is a major headache for franchisors and can be very detrimental to the brand. But also the other thing that Chick-fil-A does that's different is that you don't really own your Chick-fil-A restaurant. Like, you don't have the right to sell it at the end. You're essentially leasing the right to operate it. And so it's a completely different model than what most franchise brands are running under.
Right. Okay, so let's leave that one alone for now then. But so another, as I was thinking around sort of the time of IFA this year, so that the Chick-fil-A story, of course, seems to come up frequently because it is unusual. But the other story that was sort of floating around, but it wasn't really being talked about much at IFA this year was, I mean, I don't necessarily need to mention the brand, but there seem to be one or two brands that what they're doing is they're realizing that the success of the franchise brand is dependent on the weakest franchisee somehow improving, or if they aren't able to improve, that they help them sell or whatever. That is an interesting, and it's getting a lot of pushback by a lot of people in the industry because it just seems like it's not really an inclusive way to do things. But at the same time, you can see the value of, the sort of the rising tide will float all boats. Like if there are struggling franchisees and they maybe shouldn't have ended up with a franchise in the first place, then helping them get out, that seems like a good option. Well, what do you think about that one?
I agree. In fact, at IFA, I was at a roundtable with a franchisor, and I always have questions to franchisors because I really am hoping franchisors can start to see things just from a slightly different perspective. I mean, I think that's the key to all of us growing as humans is, having hard conversations, but also being willing to be calm enough in those conversations to say, let me try to see this from your perspective. I think that would just help us all grow as a human race. But so in this, and I'll give you some context before I land the plane here, but it was about FACs. And I just was asking the table, I said, okay, how many of you have an FAC? And then how many of you with an FAC allow your franchisees to elect who comes on the FAC, or do you appoint them? And many franchisors simply appoint the people. And so then the next question was, okay, how many of you are putting people from the bottom 30% onto your FAC? And none of them did. And so one gentleman at that said, why on earth would I want the bottom 20? And he said 20% on my FAC. And I said, well, how are you going to learn what's going on with that bottom 20%? Why are they failing? What are they frustrated with? Where are they struggling if they don't have a voice in what's happening?
Yeah.
And here's what he said. He said, that bottom 20% is just going to fail anyway. So I don't need their input. And my response to that was, if you truly believe that the bottom 20% are just dying a slow death until they fail in your system, I believe it's unethical to keep them in your system, and you should be signing a mutual release and letting them out of your system. And I truly believe that. It shouldn't be, okay, well, we're going to hold, like, you just keep going until you can't go anymore, or until you can find somebody else to sell this fledgling, failing unit to. And it's your responsibility to convince someone that there's an opportunity in it. I think many times those bottom 20% are in the bottom 20% because they never should have been approved as a franchisee in the first place. Right. And I think there needs to be more responsibility by the franchising community, in addition to the brands themselves, to acknowledge, yes, we shouldn't have approved this person, and we're not going to handcuff them now or hold them hostage in the brand when we both made a mutual mistake of saying that this was a good decision. Right. And so I think it comes down to a question of ethics. And, as an attorney, ethics is very important. We are required to take continuing education every year on ethics, particularly as a judge. That's, that is very important to me, ethics. And it disturbs me that as franchising, and the IFA frequently says, oh, we're self-regulated and we have plenty of regulation. And I see it as a big failing that we do not have any ethical standards. We don't have an ethics commission. We don't have any way for anyone to report an ethics violation by anybody in franchising. And we don't have an ethics council to review those things and to say yes or no. We feel that this is not how we want to conduct ourselves as a franchising community. And I think that is something that I would advocate for. I believe that's what we should be working toward, is having a true ethics commission that our community is held to standards by.
I agree. But at the same time, I also think that there are other things you can do before even necessarily getting into the ethics sort of policing piece of it, which is, it doesn't matter what industry you're in. This does come back to, I think, what you were saying around, mindset of, why do some businesses succeed and others don't? And it doesn't matter what operating model you use. Most models start with, well, you should start with, having a mission and a vision and having core values or principles that guide you and the people that you're hiring today and in the future, so that you have the right people who are equipped to make the right decisions from a principled perspective. And then, of course, the other thing is incentives, right? So one of the things that you talked about there was, like, if Fran Dev is incentivized just to sell units just because they need to sell units, they're going to sell to people who shouldn't really have qualified. And then the problem only starts, right? That's not the end of the problem. That's the beginning of the problem. And I think this is a challenge. As much as we all love the franchising industry, one of the challenges seems to be misaligned incentives.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Where Fran Dev and corporate folks are incentivized one way and franchisees are incentivized differently. But I do believe that there's this principle or value issue that is at the table, also doesn't really get talked about much, and it doesn't really show up in the FDD, or it does, but not explicitly.
I couldn't agree more. And if you just think about the sales process in franchising, particularly to a first-time business owner, the process can be, and I'm not saying the people necessarily, but the process can be very predatory. And what it's preying on is the emotions of that first-time franchisee who hasn't really been exposed to business and strategy and making business type decisions. So why are we selling multi-packs to a first-time business owner? And why are they buying them? Well, because they're told, well, let's lock in your 3 territories now because this is selling like hotcakes and we don't want anybody. So there's a whole FOMO of, if I don't buy my 3 territories now, somebody else is going to come in and start competing with me, and I'm going to lose out on the next best territory in my area. And there's an advantage to being first, and all of these things. And it's based on all of that's based on emotion, not on data, not on the fact that the concept has been proven in the area. I mean, I was the first to bring my brand to St. Louis, and I knew that was an advantage. And we did buy a 3-pack, and I ended up even opening 4, but I did it purely out of FOMO, like, oh my gosh, if I don't lock it down, then somebody's going to sneak in and then I'm going to be boxed in over here, right? And I think that the incentive would serve us so much better if we said, look, you can buy 1 as a first-time business owner, but we're going to give you the right of first refusal if you're hitting all your benchmarks. If you're hitting your benchmarks and you're hitting your KPIs, then you get a right of first refusal for a territory that's near you. If you're not hitting them, you don't get the right of first refusal. So then that way, the franchisor isn't locked in to a right of first refusal, but there's incentives all the way around to, let's make sure that this franchisee is capable of running a good and profitable business before they expand, because that's really where we get into a lot of trouble, is people expanding too quickly. They don't have the processes or the people in place to support the expansion. And I see that happening. And so many times people don't open the second or third license, which adds to that, statistic of single unit owners. And then on the other hand, they open them and they're not prepared for that. And then it becomes complete overwhelm and burnout. And then they want out instead of having the wherewithal in order to right the ship. And so to me, it's just a lose-lose situation. And then occasionally you get that diamond in the rough, like me, who figured it out and got them open and struggled through the first 2 and realized, hey, I got to do something different to make this really work. I had the capital in order to be able to do the right investments to turn it around. But I think that's the exception to the rule versus the rule.
Yeah. That's really interesting. And of course, I mean, it is sad that there's not a better way to do this, but that it is really much, it's like the fittest will survive, or the strongest will survive. Anyway, let's move on here, April. So, one idea we talk about often on this show is that technology doesn't solve business problems. It amplifies them. You've made similar observations about AI. Why do so many organizations rush to adopt technology before strengthening their leadership processes and operational discipline?
Well, again, I think so many times we hear what we want to hear, right? And so with AI, a lot of what we're hearing is that it solves for a lot of the issues, right? So people are seeing AI as a shortcut. Like maybe I don't need to hire this person now. Maybe I could do it through AI instead. And
Mhm.
so I think that feeds into it, right? It's the propaganda that's out there. And the propaganda is coming from, we always know, like the least educated people in the world or in whatever you're talking about, they speak the loudest, right? Because they're the best salespeople because they can't back it up with quality a lot of the time. And right now with AI, any person could jump into AI and say, "Hey, I've got this great AI and it's going to do this and this and this for you." But social media and all the other channels, people are just getting it from every angle that AI is supposed to be easy. It's supposed to be fast. It's supposed to take over like redundant tasks, which means I don't have to hire again, or I could reallocate my labor in a different way. And I don't need a process because I'll just get AI to do it. And so all of that, again, I think everything in business boils down to psychology and what you are consciously and unconsciously like assuming based upon what you're hearing. But I think that that's what's happening. And so what we see is where the normal progression of a business, you've got to get processes in place. You've got to get your departments aligned. You got to figure out what the next best hire is or what can you do fractionally to make your
Mhm.
business work. Now it's like, what do I not need to do? Like,
Mhm.
what can I avoid doing because of AI? And I think it's probably going to be like a 2 years, but the people who are doing that are going to see in like 18 months, my guess is take them that long to realize, wow, we really did this backwards. And then they're going to have to go back and shore up everything. I hope that it would be faster, but the reason I think it'll be 18 months is because people with small teams, they're not going to implement a whole bunch of AI right away. They're going to have to do it a little at a time. And so they're
Mhm.
going to always be telling themselves, well, once we get the next couple of AI employees or AI agents in place, it's going to fix this. Or they're going to kind of be playing whack-a-mole with like, let's do an AI agent to fix this piece. Oh, now let's fix this piece. So it's going to take them about 18 months before they realize, okay, this isn't working. So what do we
Yeah.
do? You got to go back to basics. You got to get your business in order first, so that you're not amplifying chaos. And
Mhm.
that's the key is you need to be asking yourself right now, could you go on you as a franchisor, as the business owner, as the franchisee, could you go on a 3-week vacation to Europe where you had no cell service, like, or on a cruise where you didn't have the Wi-Fi? Could you do that and your business not just survive, but actually grow while you're gone? And if the
Mhm.
answer is no, then you're not in a great position yet to start really implementing a ton of AI. Not to say you can't use AI and that you can't put things in place, but you can't turn your business over to AI if you can't turn your business over to humans.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's really good advice. And I think, it's interesting because we see this, even before our focus on the franchise space where we worked in multiple different industries, we're seeing this and now we're seeing it again over and over again in the franchise space where, a franchisor will come to us because their systems are broken because they've, or whatever, they got to 100 units or 200 units or whatever, but their systems are still the same ones that they built for when there were 30 units. And of course, we all know that that doesn't typically work all that well. But one of the other things that they tend to forget is that, going from 10 to 30 units or 30 to 100 units or whatever the next sort of ceiling is, um, they had to change their sort of leadership. When I say leadership, like the leadership either had to elevate or they had to add additional people who had that additional experience. And I think to your point, had that sort of strategic sort of thinking ability, and had really brought the mindset to the rest of the team to say, what got us here isn't going to get us to where we're going. Because I think, to your point, and I think this is something that you and I share, is this like mindset is so critical. And that seems to be one of the most powerful mindsets, right? Of like just knowing that whatever got you to where you are today is not going to get you to where you're going, assuming you still continue, you want to continue growing. But it's crazy how often seems like this franchisor thinks that by implementing this new CRM and revenue operations system is actually going to fix their process and people problems. And of course, we all know that that doesn't happen. We learned that the hard way, where we realized sort of halfway through an implementation that the real issue is they have the wrong people in the wrong seats, or their processes are completely not at the level that they should be for where they are in their scalability and growth. But yeah, and the shiny object syndrome is real, but that to me it shows a lack of leadership and that mindset where if you really believe that your technology, whether it's AI or something else, is gonna fix your problems, that you're in for a rude surprise.
Yeah. I see the same thing happen over and over again with franchise brands. And what I see happening is when somebody first franchises their business, they don't have a lot of revenue coming into the franchise entity, and they need doers because there's more to do than they can do, right? So you're hiring the lower level employee that accepts the salary you can pay at the time, and that is a doer that is going to get things done. And then you grow. And a lot of times, because whenever you're in a startup, and I'm sure you understand this too, Brendan, I mean,
I've been
initial,
there.
yeah,
I've made all those mistakes. Yes.
yeah, but the initial people are so critical, and you form such bonds over that like startup struggle of getting over the hump that when it comes time for you to need executive level help, the first place people look is, well, let's promote the people who've been with us. And you have to be really honest with, this person isn't an executive. This person doesn't have the strategic thinking skills that you need if you're going to go to the next level. And your business can only grow as much as you do, right? You have to grow and take the emotion out of things and really start to be able to objectively look at what's best for the business. And that is a hard thing to do,
Really hard.
especially when you've relied on people that you care about deeply to get you to the current level. And so I see that happen all the time with young franchisors. And it is a difficult thing, but I think having the right counsel and having the right support system outside of your brand is essential to helping you through that phase of growth.
Yeah, and I think the fact that you're open to having that outside, advice or counsel means that you're probably already halfway there, because you have the mindset of not having all the answers, but knowing that you need to improve the questions that you're asking, right?
Yeah, I would say probably nothing's more dangerous than a franchisor who doesn't have some kind of coach.
Yes. Yeah, well, like in any other, pick whatever you want to be successful at. If you try and do it without a coach, it's going to be really, really hard.
Right.
And your chances of success are really reduced. What we've been touching on here, April, is there's no shortage of AI tools available. And we know that, many businesses are creating complexity instead of simplifying what they should be doing. So what is your advice on how leaders should think about how AI implementation, so that it strengthens the business instead of simply adding another layer of technology or complexity?
Well, I think the number one rule has to be you have to do an assumption check, which is, like so many times we see a tool or we see something advertised, or we simply see a bottleneck in our business and we're thinking, okay, let's get AI into that. I want that tool, or let me fix that bottleneck, when it comes to AI. That's an assumption. That's an assumption where you should start. And most founders, most business owners, it doesn't matter if you're a franchisor or a franchisee or a non-franchise business, you do not have the time, the bandwidth, the expertise to or the objectivity to look at your business and to say, okay, where is the most strategic place to start? Where is either going to give us the biggest bang for our buck in time, energy, and money? Or where is there a simple, safe thing we can implement that we can layer onto in the right order that will ultimately make the biggest impact in the fastest way? And
Mm,
that's a lot of strategy that requires understanding both business and AI.
mhm,
And so that's really where I think AI implementers are going to be an essential piece of all businesses moving forward. Unfortunately, I also believe there's many businesses that will not realize that until they make the mistake of not working with an AI implementer,
mm.
until they realize things have really gotten out of control. Of course, that always makes an AI implementer's job that much harder, is to come
Sure.
into something where you have all these tools piecemealed together. They're not communicating. They're not all working off of a central brain, and you still don't have your processes documented or the right people in the right seats. And it's like, that's going to make your costs go up with an AI implementer. That's going to make the workload go up. And quite frankly, as an AI implementer, I might come into that and say, no, thank you. Like, this
Mhm,
isn't a project I want to take on because it is such a mess. And I could go help three other companies in the amount of time it's going to take me to help you, but I'm going to be able to feel successful because we're going to make so much more progress, which is a much more enjoyable project for an AI
mhm.
implementer.
Yeah, I totally agree. And I think the first thing that we're looking for in that situation again is mindset, to your point.
Right.
Because if they don't have the right mindset about how to approach implementing AI into their organizations, and they think of it as just the next tool, to your point, the chances of the implementation succeeding is greatly reduced, and we would rather move on and do that somewhere else.
Right. And I do
Um,
think there's a danger
yeah.
it could set your whole business back. Like, you're trying to move into the future and to remain competitive, and you could actually decrease your competitiveness by
Mhm.
implementing AI incorrectly. Because if your
Yeah.
competitor does it the right way, they're going to be flying past you while you fix all of the mistakes.
Right. Yeah, which brings us to my next question. Growth as a way of exposing problems that were already there, right? So as franchise organizations expand, and again, with that sort of competitive mindset, what weaknesses tend to surface first? And where are leaders often surprised by those weaknesses?
Oh, no one's going to like the answer to this question, but the weaknesses typically are going to show up first in the founders. And it's because the founders are working so hard and they're hustling so hard that they haven't spent much time on their personal or professional growth. And where this really becomes apparent is when they do attract that more sophisticated franchisee who comes in and says, maybe they have been a multi-unit owner somewhere else, or they're multi-brand owner, or they've owned other businesses. And when they come in and say, yeah, I see how cool your concept is and that it has so much potential. I want to be early. I even want to be, I'll raise my hand. I want to be an area developer or something like that. That franchisee is likely coming in believing they know more about running the business than the founder does.
Uh-huh.
And that's where you'll start to see some friction, because the founder's feelings are going to get hurt. They're going to be frustrated that that person doesn't want to listen to them or isn't respecting them enough. Now we see egos clash. And when
Uh-huh.
when you insert ego into the franchise as a founder, that is the biggest red flag to me, because I've seen ego kill more brands than anything else. You
Uh-huh.
have to be humble enough to say, I don't know how to do this. My recommendation is then you hire even someone fractionally to help do it, but simultaneously you're learning from them. You're
Uh-huh.
learning from them, and you're constantly developing your own personal and professional development in that way without delaying the growth of the brand, you trying to learn it all before you take action. And so I think that's one of the biggest bottlenecks I've seen, is that whole scenario right there play out.
Uh-huh.
It plays out in multiple ways. It could just be, you don't get that multi-unit, multi-brand person in, but you're 3 years in to franchise ownership, you have about 8 to 10 franchisees, and they're just not seeing as much progress. They're being demanding. Well, we want AI, we want this, we want that. And you as a founder still don't have a lot of revenue to work with, and you don't have a great bandwidth. And so all of your franchisees are now seeing like you're not doing enough. We see it all the time. The breakdown, let me put it this way. The franchisor-franchisee relationship is very fragile. And you really have to prioritize that as the most valuable asset in a franchise. I believe it's the most valuable asset you own in a franchise is that relationship. And every day you should be asking yourself, where are the cracks in the relationship? And how do we repair these before they become, huge gaps or wounds?
Yes. Yeah, no, we that's something that comes up on pretty much every episode that comes up is that fragile relationship. And if you don't, because ultimately without franchisee success, you don't have franchise system success.
Right. Well, and I think that's why it's so valuable. Like with Secret Sauce, having us as a third party where like we're providing business education and executive coaching to the franchisees just on business. So it doesn't have anything to do with the brand. Franchisors are always like, well, I want to make sure you're not telling them anything inconsistent with the brand. I'm like, I'm not even talking about your brand. We're talking about leadership, vision, time management. How do you understand numbers? How do we get comfortable numbers? How do I make sure your franchisees aren't avoiding looking at their numbers simply because they have a stomach ache when they do? Right? Like that's what we're talking about is we're getting them over all of those personal blocks that keep them from fully being capable of doing everything you're asking them to do. And that third party is so valuable. I was working with a brand who was complaining to me about their franchisor. And I said, let me put some perspective. There is a spectrum of franchisors, just like anything. You have great franchisors, you have absolutely terrible franchisors, and then most people are somewhere in the middle in the spectrum. As a franchisee, you're so insulated that you don't know what's going on in the rest of the franchise world. And so just by saying, look, what your franchisor did was they made a mistake, they owned the mistake, and now they're trying to correct the mistake. And they're being very transparent in that with you. Let me show you what has happened in some other brands. And these franchisees were like, are you serious? Oh my gosh, that's happening? And I'm like, yes. And so just understanding where they are in the spectrum with their franchisor gives them a much better appreciation for the things that their franchisor is doing instead of just constantly judging the franchisor based on what they perceive the franchisor is not doing. But that's not possible if you don't have that third party objective involvement where the franchisee feels like, okay, I can trust what you're saying because you either don't have a dog in the fight or you're on my side. You are helping me become the best version of myself. So you have my best interest at heart and you're telling me this. It just creates a whole different dynamic in that information coming to them in that way.
Yeah. Yeah. Yes. Well, hope, like I always say, if there's just one franchisee or prospective franchisee listening to this and gets help from this, then we know your job and my job here is done, right?
Yes.
April, I know we could go on for a long time here, but unfortunately we're running out of time. So I'm going to wrap us up with one last question, which is, if you could change one thing about how franchisors prepare and support franchisees, what would it be? And how would that change the long-term health of the entire franchise system?
I love this question. If I could change one thing, I would say start explaining to franchisees during the sales process what you do not provide. So the whole sales process is all about what you're going to get as a franchisee and how we're going to help you as a franchisee. And franchisors that draw a hard line in the sand and say, yes, you're going to get all of these things. And here is what we are not giving you. We are not going to be your marriage counselors. We are not going to provide personal and professional development to you. We are not going to be reviewing your personal finances and telling you how your expenses should be going, right? Go through that because the reality is the franchisee who's never owned a business does not have a context for all the business details. And so they just make this assumption, like I said earlier, oh, you're going to show me everything. Only once they're behind the curtain do they realize, like, well, I don't know if my expenses are right. I don't know if I'm spending too much money on this, or should I be paying my personal cell phone and home internet through my business? Right? I don't know. Well, and then they ask a question. And then if your FBC provides an answer, has your FBC just provided unlicensed financial advice and fiduciary advice? So there's a lot of liability in making those mistakes, just purely trying to help. And so by drawing that hard line in the sand, what you're doing is you're setting up the expectation. Like, we are giving you the business model. We are going to make business ownership easier for you. We're the gateway to moving through business faster. But we're not your babysitters. We're not providing everything to you. We're not your school teacher. Like, you are going to have to bring these things to the table if you want to be a top franchisee. And name what those things are: emotional intelligence, the habits of a business owner, not an employee, so that they're on notice and they can be like, well, how do I know if I have those habits? Right. And then have resources like Secret Sauce, like other potential coaches out there that can fill that gap for them, so that they're not just going and hiring a random person that doesn't have the qualifications or credentials or doesn't understand franchising. That's one of the worst mistakes you can make, because coaches who don't understand franchising will tell people to do a lot of things that may not be compliant with your brand. So that would be my biggest piece of advice. Just be honest about what you don't provide.
Yeah, which actually, in fact, I think that's really good advice, and it almost provides like a checklist. If you have the checklist starting at the top of, these are all the things that we do provide, and then you have all the empty, unchecked boxes at the bottom, like we don't do this. That essentially then helps those franchisees or prospective franchisees then go and figure out where they can get those boxes checked with outside help that they know cannot and will not come from the franchisor. Really good advice.
Well, and that's why some franchisors just require Secret Sauce as part of the system. And then they could check those off, but say, this is where Secret Sauce comes in and you're going to pay them directly. And this is where you get these things.
Really good. Awesome. April, well, thank you so much for joining me today. I know we have lots more conversations coming up, but I think this was really valuable to our listeners. So thanks for being here.
It's been my pleasure, and I can't wait to host you on our podcast and put you in the hot seat, Brendan.
Sounds great. I look forward to it. Thanks, April.